Valheim is a joy to explore, but not everything is so obvious right away, so I've put together a comprehensive look at the beginning without getting too spoilery, covering food, crafting, building, resources, mobs, combat, raids and skills, full of tips for beginners without ruining the magic of a new game. Food in Valheim is a huge deal. It increases your health, stamina, health regen and even something else later on. When you first drop in at the spawn point among the Forsaken Stones, you'll have immediate access to your first food. Just check behind the stones and you'll find a few bushes with raspberries and a few mushrooms on the ground. Pick them up and eat both. Even just these two items will increase your health from 25 up to 47 and stamina from 50 up to 85 and give you a health regen of 2 per tick. Health is of course important, as no matter how good you are realistically, you're going to take damage, and having more health allows for more mistakes. But stamina is generally more important, as this game's primary resource is stamina for combat, running and even building. More will allow you to do more damage, avoid more attacks, run more and build more. You can use 3 types of food at the same time. All foods have a duration, and as that duration ticks down, the effectiveness of the food will reduce. Once the food has reached half of its duration, it will begin to flash, signalling that you can eat something to replace or refresh its duration. Food is also split up into 3 very basic types, and this is on whether it primarily aids health, stamina or is balanced between the two. There is a 4th type, but you won't encounter it until you are quite the veteran. Food in Valheim is not a means to prevent starvation, but a means to improve your situation. So while not eating won't kill you directly, it is not advisable to ever leave yourself so vulnerable. In my opinion, it is best to eat 1 health food and 2 stamina foods. This is just a general rule I go by. However, 1 health, 1 stamina, 1 balanced is also fine, and if you are playing hard mode or hardcore, 2 health and 1 stamina is probably more beneficial. Being able to take 2 hits or more from whatever mobs you are facing without dying is a good place to be. In the meadows you have access to several different foods, first being the forageables, like mushrooms and raspberries. These are balanced and stamina food respectively, and will regrow after a few in-game days, so it's always a good idea to mark these locations on your map. I like to just use R for raspberries and M for mushrooms, then a number representing how many bushes or mushrooms were at the spot, allowing me to come back later and farm multiple spots at once. Another little tip is to build a hoe and flatten the ground where the mushrooms spawn. This will make them far easier to spot next time. Next are the mob dropped foods. For the meadows, these are neck, boar and deer meat. These are health foods. As they are meat, you will need to cook them to use them as food. So just build a wooden spit over a campfire and interact with the spit, placing any meat in your inventory on it. Though be careful, they all take a little while to cook, and if you leave them too long, they'll turn into coal, which can be useful but a little annoying when you need the food. Next, spawn near water in the meadows, while boar and deer will spawn all over the biome. Lastly for the meadows is honey, a true superfood, but it is farmable to an extent. While a stamina food at base, it also gives a huge 5 health regen per tick, which makes a big difference in drawn out battles. When exploring the meadows, be sure to look inside abandoned cabins, campsites and towers. Sometimes you'll find a beehive, and when you do, you are in luck. Get too close or attack and the hive will try to poison you. The easiest method to break the hive is to demolish the building that is supporting it. On destruction, the hive will drop a queen bee and some honey. You can then build your own friendly hive at your base using the queen and some wood to get a consistent supply of honey. To battle those necks and boars as well as hunt those deer, you're going to want a weapon. You could do it with just your fists, but it will quickly become tedious. To build that beehive at your base, you'll need to gather wood. Again, could do that with your hands, but it'll go much quicker taking down trees with an axe instead of picking up sticks or punching bush. For all that, we need to craft. The most basic of things can be crafted in your inventory. These are such things as hammer, stone axe, wooden club or torch. With a hammer built, you can build far more, such as a workbench which will allow you to build bases or craft far greater tools, weapons and armor. There are more than just this basic workbench, but for the first biome, it's the only one you need to worry about. Building a workbench and then covering it from the elements with a few walls and a roof will allow you to interact with it and craft items. Tools like axes for both combat and cutting down trees, weapons, armor and even arrows for your bow can be crafted through this. Tools, weapons and armor also have durabilities that will lower with their use. You can repair those items at the workbench. Whether you can craft an item or even see its blueprint depends on 2 things. Whether you have ever gathered all of the items required to craft it, and whether you have the level of workbench required to craft it. Once these two things are met, you will gain the blueprint. To upgrade the level of your workbench, you must build an upgrade close to it. Obtaining the blueprints to build these upgrades is as simple as obtaining the items to build it. So for unlocking craftables in Valheim, simply pick up all new items you come across and build any workbenches and upgrades you can as you gain the plans, and the game will do the rest. Bases can be built pretty much anywhere in Valheim, other than directly at the spawn or in deep water. To build structures, you first need to build a workbench. This workbench will allow you to build walls, floors, roofs, chests, beds, and more within 20 meters of it. To build outside that radius, just build another workbench. There are no limits beyond lagging out your computer to how many you can build. If you remove the workbench or it gets destroyed, what you've built won't fall down. You just won't be able to remove or repair what you've built without building another workbench within 20 meters of it. Bear in mind this 20 meters is a sphere shape, but that isn't so important early on as you won't be able to build so high with just wood. Touching on that subject, the building parts have a stability feature. This essentially means that the further you get from the grounded piece, the more unstable the pieces will be until eventually they will fall apart upon being built. Removing supports will cause the game to recalculate the stability of all pieces affected, and so removing the ground piece only, you can demolish a whole building, which is the tactic I generally advise you employ versus beehives. You can tell stability from a colour system. Hovering over a built piece with the hammer equipped will show its stability colour. Blue means it is grounded, green means it is stable. The colours then move from green through yellow to dark red being incredibly unstable. Basic wood pieces can be built up to 12 meters straight up, but when you build roofs that have space below them, it's less simple, so be sure to experiment. Building a basic frame first to ensure you can build what you envision will save you a lot of time versus building the entire bottom of your base to find out you can't build the roof fully as it's too unstable. Lastly, for the basics of building is durability. Each building part will have a durability, and when it takes damage from mobs or even yourself, the durability will go down. Once it hits 0, it will fall apart, leaving the items you used to build it dropping to the ground. You can tell the durability of an item similar to the stability. Just hover over it with the hammer equipped and you'll see a little yellow bar representing the part's current durability. You should note that many build parts will have their durability lowered when exposed to rain or submerged in water. A roof above the part will protect it from the rain, but nothing can save it from the water. However, this durability will never drop below 50% due to water damage. To build all those bases, you are going to need resources. The first resources you'll need are wood and stone to make your hammer, axe and maybe a club. Without an axe, you'll need to pick up sticks or punch bushes to get a bit of initial wood. These stone can be found on the ground, also waiting to be picked up. Once you've crafted an axe, you can now take down normal trees, though be careful when felling a tree in Valheim, it will fall, and if it hits you, it'll probably kill you. It'll take a few more biomes of play before you can survive a tree to the face. Trees won't just drop wood. When initially felling, they can also drop resin, feathers and seeds. You won't be able to do anything with seeds right now, but it's worth holding onto them for later. The resin, though, can be used to make standing torches, among other things. The feathers can be used to make arrows, so be sure to pick up everything and store your materials in chests at your base. Other resources can also be gathered, such as deer hide from deer, leather scraps from boar, and flint from the edges of rivers and ocean. A typical progression might be to build a club, which is really a great first weapon. Use that to hunt boars that are aggressive anyway and so will attack you on sight, then use the leather scraps with some wood to make a crude bow. Craft some arrows and then hunt deer. Deer are very skittish and will run if they even sniff you, and while it is possible and very valid tactic to sneak up behind a deer then use your club or axe to sneak attack them, it's just quicker and easier to use a bow. You'll need a lot of deer hide and leather scraps for building and crafting more things in the future, so it's good to hunt all you see. One big thing to look out for is a 2-star boar. It is a very rare occurrence, and if you see one you should not kill it, and instead tame it. Boars can be tamed. They are the only tameable mob in the meadows. The simple explanation of taming is that if a mob can be tamed, you simply provide it with food and hide yourself nearby, as a tameable mob will not eat if it thinks it is in danger. After some time, it will become tame and be friendly with you. At this point, they can breed with each other. Breeding boars is an amazing way to get easy food and leather scraps early on. You can feed the boars mushrooms and raspberries. The most simple and easy setup is to build a small enclosure, use yourself as bait to lure the boars in, then lock them in and escape before they get you. You'll want 2 of them, and only one needs to be the 2 or 1 star to eventually get children of their quality. Once trapped, just throw some food on the floor within reach of the boars and hide nearby but out of sight, and they'll begin to eat and tame. You can see this via the yellow hearts popping up as they eat and tame. When talking about taming, I mentioned a 2-star boar. Most mobs can come in 3 different levels or quality. These are noted as stars. The mobs with stars also usually have some kind of aesthetic difference, such as a 2-star deer having most impressive looking antlers and 2-star boars being noticeably bigger with more and bigger tusks. But that's not the only difference. Starred mobs also have more health and deal more damage, and the differences are considerable. The flat rule is that a 1-star mob will do 50% more damage and have double the health of a 0-star mob, and a 2-star mob will have triple the health and do double the damage of a 0-star mob. Fortunately, starred mobs are rarer than non-starred. Of course, it's not all negatives. Starred mobs will also drop more loot, usually. For example, a 0-star boar will drop 1 leather scrap, a 1-star boar will drop 2, and a 2-star will drop 4. It's the same for the meat too. So taming a 2-star or even 1-star boar to breed and eventually get nothing but 1 or 2-star boars will provide you far greater resources for your efforts. As far as enemy mobs go, getting the extra resources is usually more of a bonus due to the increased danger they present. But knowing what you are dealing with and not getting yourself into a false sense of security will help you survive. Another important thing to note for mobs that will be obvious to some but maybe not to all is that all mobs have different resistances and weaknesses. Some of course will not be weak to anything, but most mobs will be best defeated with a clever use of weapon choice. Skeletons, for example, are weak to blunt and fire damage, making the club a particularly effective weapon against them. Clubs are usually one of the most useful weapons to focus on for the first half of the game, so specialising in clubs and maces will get you far as your skill increases. Combat in Valheim is somewhat Souls-light. By this I mean it is stamina based and rewards strategic thinking. Running, swinging your weapon, rolling, parrying, blocking, these all require stamina to perform. Parrying can be done with your fists, as can blocking, but you'll need to over-level the enemy by quite a bit to be able to do that. So it is generally advised in the beginning to craft a weapon such as a club and a shield. I make these 2 items well before I build myself some armour, as you don't need armour if you don't get hit. The better your weapon, the shorter your time fighting, so the less the enemy has chance to hit you. If you have a shield, then you can block or even better parry. Not all shields can be used to parry, such as tower shields, but a basic wooden shield will allow you to do this. Successfully parrying requires you to hit the button to block timed with when the enemy is about to make contact with you. A successful parry will stagger your enemy, allowing you a short window to attack them for far greater damage. However, you can also be staggered. If you block or take damage, you'll notice a small vertical red meter show up. This is your stagger meter. If you take enough force, you'll be staggered and take crazy damage. If the mob is too powerful for you, it could stagger you in a single hit, even when blocking, so be sure not to get into fights you don't stand a chance in. While I consider myself a proficient roller in Souls games, I rarely ever used in Valheim, but it works in the same way. To roll requires stamina and will afford you iframes. These are a few fractions of a second where you will be invincible. Timing the roll so that you are in the middle of it when the enemy strikes will result in you taking no damage. Rolling, parrying and even just walking backwards at the correct time to avoid a strike will all take practice to master, and as you fight new mobs, you'll slowly pick up their attack and movement timings and patterns, allowing you to take them far easier in the future. Unless you turn the feature off, you'll periodically get raided. A raid is where enemy mobs will spawn en masse for a short time to hunt you and try to kill you. Raids only happen at player bases, and a base for this is defined as somewhere that has a certain number of specific items. Essentially, if it's a place with a few useful things for you like a bed, a chest, a fire, etc., it is probably enough to trigger a raid. What you are raided by is defined by a few things: which area bosses have been taken down, as well as whether an amount of some mobs have died. Raids can be fun or terrifying depending on how prepared you are. Always remaining rested to increase your health and stamina regen will help massively. To be rested, simply be indoors in range of a fire for a bit, or sit down outside next to a fire. The comfort of your surroundings will affect how long the rested buff lasts, so building things like a deerskin rug or some banners will help here. Staying rested and having food at the ready to buff up will give you a fighting chance, but you can also build defences. In the beginning, this is mostly stake walls and big doors. Building a small ramparts for you to shoot the enemies from range will allow you to farm resources from these mobs, but you could also just hide and repair your walls to prevent the mobs from harming you or the rest of your base. I'd personally recommend fighting, as those resources are often quite the boon. The levelling system in Valheim is not like most games. There are no ability points to spend on a skill tree, it's very simple. There are skills. Doing things related to these skills will give you experience toward those skills, which will level them up over time. Each level of the skill will give you a related buff, such as the club skill, gaining experience via hitting mobs with a club or mace, and each level increases the damage you do with the club or mace. Blocking or parrying the attack will increase the blocking skill, which in turn will increase your block armor. Running increases the run skill, which increases your run speed and lowers stamina drain from running, and these skills go higher. And as these skills go higher, they have very noticeable effects. However, there is a harsh reality to skills. When you die, you lose a percentage of all your skills. This is the penalty to death in Valheim. Upon death, you will lose 5% of your total skill levels, as well as all progress toward the next skill levels. You will, however, gain a buff for 10 minutes that prevents any further skill loss. This is to prevent a death cycle from draining your hard-earned skills to nothing from a single situation. So if you die, don't mess around, get your stuff back. On death, you will drop a grave with your inventory in it, and return to either the last bed you set your spawn to, or the central spawn point at the Forsaken Stones. You will be naked and foodless, so it's always best to have some food and maybe your old armor and weapons at your base, so you can get your items back. I hope this was helpful. Do you have any extra tips I missed, such as using normal tree logs to break fine wood trees to get that fine wood bow super early? Whack them down below for the new players and try to be as spoiler free as possible. You only get that first playthrough once.